What if you woke up one morning, opened your laptop, and realized you could see everything? Every password, every bank account, every secret that powerful people thought was buried forever. What would you do with that kind of power? Would you use it for good? Would you run? Or would you become the most dangerous person on the planet? My name is Marcus, and 3 years ago, I was eating cold ramen noodles in a basement apartment that smelled like old carpet and broken dreams. I had $17 in my bank account, a second-hand laptop with a cracked screen, and absolutely zero idea that my entire life was about to change forever. Let me take you back to the beginning, because every great story starts in the dark before the dawn. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, where the biggest career ambitions were either working at the factory or managing the local grocery store. My dad worked double shifts his whole life and still couldn't keep the lights on sometimes. I remember being 12 years old, watching my mom count change on the kitchen table and thinking, there has to be another way. There just has to be. But nobody around me could show me what that way looked like. In school, I was the weird kid, the one who stayed up until 3 in the morning, not playing video games, but pulling them apart, taking the code to pieces, asking, why does this work? What happens if I change this one tiny thing? My teachers called it a distraction. My classmates called it bizarre. But you know what I called it? I called it curiosity. And as Albert Einstein once said, curiosity is more important than knowledge, because knowledge is limited, but curiosity encircles the whole world. I taught myself programming from free YouTube tutorials and borrowed library books. I learned Python in a summer, JavaScript in a winter. By the time I was 19, I could build things that grown adults with computer science degrees couldn't figure out. But I had no diploma, no connections, and no money. And in the real world, those things matter a lot, or at least that's what everyone kept telling me. So there I was, 22 years old, brilliant in a world that didn't recognize my kind of brilliance, sleeping on a futon, living off ramen and caffeine, sending out resumes to tech companies who would reject me before they even finished reading my name. Can you imagine that feeling? Working harder than anyone around you, being smarter in ways that matter, and still being completely invisible? Have you ever felt like the world just couldn't see what you were truly capable of? That's exactly where I was. And then everything changed because of one stupid mistake that turned into the greatest accident of my life. I was freelancing, picking up tiny jobs online for barely anything, when I stumbled across a small financial company's website. I wasn't trying to hack them, I was just curious, the way I always was, the way I always had been. And I noticed something, a gap, a vulnerability in their security system so obvious that it was almost embarrassing. It was like someone had built a vault but forgotten to put a door on the back. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because what I did next defined everything that came after. I could have walked away, I could have exploited it, but I didn't do either of those things. I spent 3 days documenting exactly what the problem was, how someone could exploit it, and most importantly, how to fix it. Then I wrote a detailed report and emailed it directly to their security team. I expected nothing, maybe a thank you, maybe silence. What I got was a phone call that changed my life. Their head of cybersecurity was a former government intelligence officer named Diana Chen, and when she called me, she didn't say thank you. She said, how did a nobody from Ohio find what our entire security team missed for 6 months? I said, because I think like someone who wants to get in, not someone who's trying to keep people out. There was a long pause on the phone, and then she said 3 words I will never forget. She said, come meet me. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a movie, right? It kind of does. But life, when you're paying attention, when you're genuinely curious, when you lead with integrity, even when nobody's watching, life has a way of opening doors you never even knew existed. As the great philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. My step was that email. Yours might be something completely different, but the principle is the same. You have to take the step. Nobody can do it for you. Diana became my mentor. She brought me into a world I had only ever read about: ethical hacking, penetration testing, cybersecurity consulting for governments and corporations.
She saw in me no teacher, no employer, no resume screener ever had. She saw my actual mind, my actual potential. But let me be honest with you, because this is a motivational story, not a fairy tale. It was not easy, not even close. There were days when I sat in rooms full of people with Ivy League degrees who looked at me like I didn't belong. Days when I made mistakes so embarrassing I wanted to drive back to Ohio and never touch a keyboard again. Diana pushed me harder than anyone ever had. She expected more from me than I expected from myself. There were nights I called her crying, genuinely crying, saying I wasn't good
Enough. I wasn't smart enough. This world wasn't made for someone like me. And do you know what she always said? She said, Marcus, the people who changed this world weren't the ones who fit perfectly into it. They were the ones who refused to. Have you ever had someone in your life who believed in you before you believed in yourself? If you have, hold on to them. If you haven't found that person yet, let me tell you something. Sometimes that person starts out being you. You have to be the one to believe first. Within 2 years, I had built a reputation in cybersecurity circles that most people spend a decade trying to achieve. I was being flown to conferences in London, Tokyo, Singapore. I was consulting for companies whose names you see on billboards every single day. I was sitting in rooms with senators, CEOs, intelligence directors, having conversations about protecting systems that ran the infrastructure of entire nations. Me, the kid from Ohio, eating cold ramen noodles. And here's the moment I want you to really hear, because this is the heart of everything. One afternoon, I was at a major cybersecurity summit in Washington, D.C. I had just given a keynote presentation to about 400 of the most powerful tech minds in the country. And afterward, a young woman walked up to me. She couldn't have been more than 18 years old. She had this old, beat-up notebook full of handwritten code. She looked at me with eyes that I recognized immediately, because I used to look in the mirror and see those same eyes. Hungry, scared, brilliant, lost. She said, I taught myself to code, but nobody will give me a chance. How did you do it? And I looked at her, and I thought about every cold night, every rejection, every moment of doubt, every ramen noodle, every cracked laptop screen. I thought about Diana. I thought about that email I almost didn't send. And I said, you already have the most important thing. You have the hunger. Everything else is just time. She cried. I think I cried a little too. Don't judge me. That conversation reminded me why any of this matters. Not the money, not the conferences, not the title. It matters because somewhere right now, there is a kid in a basement or a small apartment or a tiny village somewhere in the world who has a mind that could genuinely change things. And they're being told they don't fit. They don't have the right background. They don't look the part. To that person, I want to say directly, the world doesn't always recognize genius when it walks through the front door. Sometimes genius has to find the back window. As Maya Angelou once said, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Do not let anyone reduce you. Not a rejection letter, not a grade, not a paycheck, not someone else's opinion of your potential. Because here's the truth about hacking, the real truth, the philosophical truth that goes way beyond computers. Every single person who has ever done something remarkable in this world was, in some way, a hacker. They looked at a system, whether it was business, science, art, society itself, and they asked, why does it have to work this way? What if I tried something different? Steve Jobs hacked design. Marie Curie hacked science. Muhammad Ali hacked the sport of boxing. Nelson Mandela hacked an entire nation's story. The question was never whether you're talented enough or connected enough or lucky enough. The question is, are you curious enough? Are you hungry enough? Are you willing to stay up until 3 in the morning, not because someone told you to, but because you genuinely cannot stop? If the answer is yes, then I promise you, your basement moment is not your ending. It is your origin story. And the most powerful origin stories never start in comfort. They start in the dark. They start with cold ramen and a cracked screen, and a dream so big it almost feels embarrassing to admit out loud. Today, I run my own cybersecurity firm. We protect hospitals, schools, financial systems, critical infrastructure. We employ 37 people, many of them self-taught, many of them told at some point that they didn't fit the traditional mold. I am genuinely, deeply grateful for every single hard thing that happened on the way here. Every door that closed, every person who doubted me, every night I wanted to quit. Because without all of that, I never would have found the window. So I'll leave you with this. What's your window? What's the thing you're curious about at 3 in the morning when everyone else is asleep? What's the gap in the wall that only you can see? Find it. Document it. Send the email. Make the call. Take the step. Your story is already being written. Make sure it's one worth telling.